Well, to talk more about this unprecedented summit between the United States and North Korea, I'm joined by Marco Vicenzino. He's the director of the Global Strategy Project. Thank you for joining us. Now, in the run-up to this, there has been a kind of a playing down of expectations, hasn't there, from the US side. Initially, Trump was going to go in and demand complete denuclearization. It would seem that that is no longer the case.
It's important to manage expectations. Obviously, this is a high-stakes game. It's going to be a long road ahead. I think the president is determined to come out with some form of accord. Possibly, we can use the word détente, whereby you would see possibly an agreement, or at least a semblance of an agreement. That both sides can claim some sort of a beginning of a process. That's what I would say is a start and the beginning of a process of a long one. Technically, it would be bilateral, but in essence, it's actually essentially and fundamentally, it's multilateral. It involves either directly or indirectly all the other neighbors in the region. And like I said, each of them can walk away with something. Obviously, for Trump, it's very important to walk away. He's looking towards the midterm elections. And there's the many variables at play, and it's not just between the U.S. and North Korea. This involves, obviously, South Korea. This involves China, to a large extent. Indirectly, someone would say even Russia, and also Japan. I mean, a strong U.S. ally, Japan, has been struggling. Has been fearing that that Trump would make some kind of accord without taking into full consideration their interests. So we're talking about a long-term game, and the key word is denuclearization, and that means different things to different people. Obviously, for Trump and many of the Western countries, it would mean basically it's a full and verifiable denuclearization. And then for the North Koreans, it could possibly mean something else. Remember, the nuclear element for them was always, they consider what they call the treasured sword of justice. For them, denuclearization, although they may say it in principle, may be some kind of aspiration, like people in the international community when they talk about a nuclear-free world. A nuclear-free world will never happen, and I think somewhat, to a certain extent, the North Koreans are really looking at, in terms of denuclearization, at that as more of an aspiration. What they're really looking for is some form of sanctions relief, and it wouldn't just be by the U.S., most importantly, it'd be by China. Right. Because obviously, if there's going to be an economic transformation in North Korea, that will be led by the Chinese and not by the Americans. Right, and let's talk a bit more, because you touched on it there, let's talk a bit more about other countries in the region, about North Korea's neighbours, specifically the US allies, Japan and South Korea. What would be the worst case scenario for them watching this summit unfold? What do they have to worry about? Well, basically, if the whole thing fails, they come out with absolutely nothing. I mean, the risks is that North Korea, throughout this entire process of recent weeks, has been legitimized. And another thing is the fact that if you look within North Korea itself, you look, the policy of the Trump administration was maximum pressure on North Korea. Well, I'm not saying that maximum pressure is irreversible to take it, but it's going to be, the U.S. is going to struggle to assume and to reassert that policy once again, because look, North Korea has been legitimized throughout this process, and that it would be difficult to bring the Chinese and also the Russians on board with that policy of maximum pressure. For Japan, it would be, they were in full support of maximum pressure throughout. For South Korea, for the new president, the new government of South Korea, they've invested a lot of leverage and a lot of in this entire process. And there have been many skeptics, particularly on the right in South Korea. And if the current president, the new president, fails to come up with anything at all, he'll lose a lot of legitimacy early into his presidency. Marco Vicenzino, thank you very much. Thank you. And we will